Depend on and turn to the news and talk of Kern County. News Talk 1180 KERN.
Now it's Moneywise with the Moneywise Guys on Kern Radio News Talk 1180 with Bakersfield's financial professionals.
I need a dollar, 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 that's what I need. Hey, hey, well I need a dollar, 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 that's what I need. Hey, hey, said I need a dollar, 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 that's what I need. And if I share with you my story, would you share your dollar with me?
Securities offered through SCF Securities Inc., a registered broker-dealer member, FINRA, SIPC. SCF Investment Advisors Inc. is an SEC registered investment advisor. SCF Securities as a firm does not make a market in or research on or make a market on any of the issues mentioned in this broadcast.
Now here are the Moneywise Guys.
That's right, we're back. Time is 11:06. We're the Moneywise Guys in the padded radio room off Stockdale Highway. I'm Garrow Ellis. Shared Waits in the house, as well as Chris Pelster. Kyle Jones from the law offices of Kyle Jones will be joining us at the bottom of the hour, but we've got a great guest joining us, Lloyd Chapman, president of the American Small Business League. Going to have a great conversation with him, but as we normally do at the top of the hour, we got to throw out the market information, market news. Unless you've had your head in the sand, you know that the government began a October 1st shutdown. First shutdown in 17 years. It placed about 800,000 federal employees on unpaid leave and closing some services, and that ongoing talk and the debates are heated up over the weekend. John Boehner got near a microphone and would let it. He obviously doesn't let anyone talk. He's saying, no, we're not going to budge on this. So obviously the markets are reacting to it. The futures last night said that it looked like the market was going to open up about 120 points to the downside. Well, it did. Right now we're only down 68, so we'll take it. 15,003. Actually, it's at 14,988, down 84 points now. That's some volatility over the last 10 minutes. NASDAQ down 21. SP 500 down 7 points, 0.4% to 1,683. We have oil, black gold, Texas tea down 39 cents to $103.45. That's 0.4%. 10-year bond yield ticking down in yield to 2.62. That means they're buying into the 10-year bond. So we have bonds going up, stocks going down. Well, what about hillbilly gold? That's silver. Silver's up 54 cents, 2.5% advance there to $22.29. Let's look at precious. Precious gold up $12.20, 0.9% advance to 1,322. All right, without further ado, let's bring on Lloyd Chapman, president of the American Small Business League. You know, he's been around for more than 20 years. He's worked to protect the interest of our nation's 27 million small businesses. You know, and that's very, very, very important. That's why Mr. Chapman founded the American Small Business League with a goal of stopping the diversion of federal small contracts to large corporations. And that's why we're going to have him on the show to kind of educate us on that. You know, small businesses are America's job creators. You know how we, in the Moneywise radio room, love small business. And we want to do everything we can to protect that, especially on the jobs front. That's essential to what we believe our nation's economic prosperity. And we need to ensure that, you know, the government does everything it can to protect that. So let's bring on, without further ado, Mr. Lloyd Chapman. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together. How you doing, Lloyd?
I'm doing great. How you guys doing?
We're doing fantastic, my brother. You know, it's very intriguing. You know, we're having you on the show today to talk about the number of Fortune 500 companies that received small business contracts. Okay, let me repeat that. Fortune 500 companies that received small business contracts in 2012, 2013. And let's talk about that, Mr. Chapman. You know, through a Freedom of Information Act request that you sent to the Small Business Administration, you were able to obtain some of this data. Can you talk about this?
Sure. So federal law says that 23% of all government contracts should go to small businesses. That is the largest economic stimulus program for the middle class in U.S. history. It should be well over $100 billion a year going in the middle class. But every year for about a decade, most of that money goes to Fortune 500 firms and even some of the biggest companies in Europe like Rolls-Royce and British Aerospace and Finmeccanica. And we found out just last week that last year, 235 Fortune 500 firms got federal small business contracts. Now, the reason people should care is this is, without question, the largest economic stimulus program for the middle class in the history of America. And it's been completely hijacked by these big corporations. What really concerns me is it looks to me like they're going to try to close the SB completely to cover up this fraud. And it is fraud. People can go to my channel on YouTube and watch some of the videos about this. And I'll have to say that I've been doing this 20 years, and I am just sort of dumbstruck that it's still going on.
Now, let me repeat what you said. One of the things that you said is that by law, the federal government is obligated to award a fair portion, which you said 23% of its contracts to small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And what? Just so I'm clear on this, what are they defining as a small business? What's the criteria for that?
Well, when you look at the actual definition of a small business, it says a company that's independently owned and having less than 1,500 employees. The most common definition is 500. So it's actually completely illegal. It's against every federal law for Fortune 500 firms to get small business contracts, but it's gone on for a decade. And you can imagine the power that these Fortune 500 firms have in Washington. We're talking, Lockheed, Boeing, Northrop, Raytheon, General Dynamics, the biggest companies in America. And they just, I hate to say it, folks, but they just seem to kind of own our government. And they get whatever they want. And the people, get left with the short end of the stick. But the biggest problem right now is I think they're going to try to actually close the SBA to cover up this fraud. They've sort of painted themselves in a corner. Every year for a decade, they've claimed that these Fortune 500 firms got small business contracts accidentally. They call it anomalies.
Every year.
Every year for a decade, yeah. Well, that's pretty much, run its course. And they know they're not going to get away with that much longer. So they're going to try to close the SBA. And anytime somebody has proposed to close the SBA in the last 40 years, the way they want to close it is to combine it with the Department of Commerce. So the Department of Commerce represents the very Fortune 500 firms that have been allowed to hijack these contracts. You can imagine what would happen if you combine the agency that represents America's smallest companies with the agency that represents the very Fortune 500 firms that are stealing all this money. And I think it's going to happen.
How are these large companies, these Fortune 500 companies, getting these contracts? How are they getting
to tell you the truth, there's multiple ways, but one way is federal contracting officers will just mark the box. I've got a contract in my office. I blew it up to about 3 feet square where General Dynamics got $28 million. I've got one where Bechtel got $128 million. And last year, General Dynamics got $238 million in federal small business contracts. So they just do it. And there's not much you can do about it. I go to court. I've won 35 lawsuits against them. But they're so powerful, they control all the congressional committees. And I've written a bill in Congress called the Fairness and Transparency in Contracting Act that would stop it. But most Americans don't know this, but every congressional committee in our government that's there to regulate a particular industry is generally controlled by that industry through contributions. Like if you look at the Senate Banking Committee, you'll see that the chair of that committee, whoever it is, gets millions in contributions. So the committees in Congress, like the House Small Business Committee and the Senate Small Business Committee that could stop this, are dominated by these Fortune 500 firms.
Oh, when you started when you founded the American Small Business League, you obviously had this goal in mind, like I said earlier in the show, of stopping this diversion. And you've done it. You've been very, very successful. I mean, this dates all the way back into even to the 90s, I would think. Did you, I thought I had read at one time where your work triggered a congressional investigation in the F-22 stealth fighter program?
Yep. That was my first lawsuit I won back in 91. And federal law said at that time the small business should get 20%. And on that contract, I got 1/100th of 1%. So I got a congressional investigation. The Air Force was forced to allocate $500 million to small businesses. And I've been doing it ever since. But, it's pretty tough for a small business group to take on, Lockheed, Boeing, and Northrop and all these big corporations. But people should, call their congressmen and call their senators and let them know that they're against any effort to close the Small Business Administration. What they're going to do, by the way, is they're going to close the SBA and call it streamlining government. So President Obama has said he's going to close the SBA to save $300 million a year. Now, to most people, that sounds like a lot of money. Pentagon auditors found a few months ago the Pentagon cannot find $86 million an hour. Think about that. So the Pentagon loses $86 million an hour. So they lose enough money in a day to run the SBA for a year. So the concept of closing the SBA to save $300 million is laughable. If people want to see something fascinating, go to Google and search on Donald Rumsfeld, $2.3 trillion missing. The day before 9/11, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld went on national television and announced that they could not find $2.3 trillion in Pentagon spending, and that has gone unabated.
Well, as far as the small business, and I'm glad you're there to help small business. I want to talk more about the accountability of all this. Is there something there to hold these firms accountable? We're going to take a break, but we got Lloyd Chapman, president of the American Small Business League, joining us. Give us some information that I actually had not thought. No, I did not know this. I did not know this. We're the Moneywise Guys. Phone lines are open for you at 842-5376. That's 842-KERN. Be right back.